Isn't it interesting that Jonah is sitting in a booth, because he had built booths many times before to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, and he knew exactly what the feast was all about. There was one part of the feast that I haven't mentioned that was the most important part of the feast. Not only was it to celebrate God's and commemorate God's protection, but it was also called the Feast of the Ingathering, because Zechariah 14:16 looks to the day when the nations will flow into Jerusalem and celebrate the Feast of Booths. In other words, it was also a feast to celebrate the harvest of the nations. Here is Jonah sitting in a booth that was meant to celebrate the fact that God was going to save the nations, and he is crying for their destruction. Does anybody see the juxtaposition? Is that striking to anybody else this morning? It's a stark contrast. We're like Jonah. We sit in our modern tabernacles called churches, busy with our petitions and drives and boycotts, instead of being busy and getting on mission with God. We're called to display compassion and love to sinners, to be a missionary people. Finally, number 3, compassion proceeds from a correct understanding of humanity's plight. Notice that God makes a vine for Jonah. This was some kind of plant, some kind of gourd that had large leaves that would shield and shelter Jonah, so it took the heat off of his head, and Jonah was very glad. Also notice in verse 6, this is a critical juncture in the story, and notice what appears. You have a title added on to the name of God. Every time you see this title in the Bible, L-O-R-D, and it's all in English, it's all in capital letters, it refers to God's covenant name, Yahweh. Yahweh always refers to God's care and concern, not just for his chosen people, but for all people. God's compassion for everyone. So Jonah is enjoying the vine.